makes an image of the god. A daughter-in-law of a village household is childless. It is suspected that a ghost may be the cause of this misfortune. The shaman carries the god's image into the house. That night, the held in the house. A small chair is used as a spirit medium. Friends and neighbors of the family have come to help in the seance, and they have turned the effect of the chair. Suspect that the ghost who has been troubling the family is an ancestor. They repeatedly approach the ancestral tablet with the chair. It is very tiring to hold on to the chair, and the men spell one another at frequent intervals. Most of the men wear gloves, since the force of pulling on the chair will quickly rub blisters on unprotected hands. The men are waiting for a spirit, perhaps that of an ancestor, to come and occupy the chair. They carry the chair all around the room and occasionally go outside, continually moving the chair up and down. A special extension of the chair's right arm is brought in contact with the ancestral tablet, where are written all the names of the family's ancestors. When a spirit possesses the chair, it will write on the tabletop with this extension of the arm. At last, a spirit possesses the chair. The spirit occupying the chair communicates by writing Chinese characters in the sawdust spread out on the tabletop. It is confirmed that an ancestral spirit has been troubling the family. The ghost is that of an uncle who died without any offspring of his own. Even though the man's brothers inherited his property, no provision was made for the uncle to have descendants of his own. His grave has been so neglected that no one even knows its exact location. For 50 years, the uncle's bones have rotted in the grave and have received no sacrifices. As the seance progresses, the spirit discloses that the reason for the family's daughter-in-law remaining childless after 2 years of marriage is that the dead uncle's ghost is punishing them for neglecting his grave. To cure the daughter-in-law's barrenness, the family must exhume the uncle's grave and provide his bones with a new tomb. The uncle's brother must also adopt out one grandson to worship the uncle as an ancestor. The family agrees to do these things, and the chair writes out a number of charms onto sheets of spirit money. The charms are Chinese characters having a magical potency. The spirit money is made of sheets of paper printed up with seals and imprints, which make them valid currency in the spirit world. The charms will be used when the uncle's grave is dug up. As the seance comes to an end, well past the hour of midnight, some sheets of spirit money are burned in offering to the gods. The next morning, the divining chair and other paraphernalia are taken out to the village graveyard. Most of the men are relatives of the family who come along to help. The shaman's youngest son waves goodbye, and another son brings the divining chair on his bicycle. arrived at the graveyard, a short distance outside the village, the image of the Emperor of the Dark Heavens is placed at a vantage point where he can comfortably view the work of exhuming the grave. It has been over 50 years since the uncle died, and no one is sure of the exact location of his grave. They will therefore use the divining chair to find where to dig. There are many different types of spirit mediums in Chinese tradition. Some are human, and the gods speak directly through them. Others are inanimate, such as this divining chair, and the exact nature of the force directing the chair, whether God or ghost, is often not specified. The men hold the divining chair by its legs and begin to move it around, just as they did the night before. Some spirit money is set afire and brushed over the chair to purify it. The chair has no bottom, but instead has a large stick of incense projecting through the seat. After a few minutes, the chair strikes the ground. This is the spot where the dead man's bones will be found. A specialist is employed to dig out the bones. This man works full-time exhuming corpses for ritual reburial, which is practiced by most people of southeast China and Taiwan. He uses the trowel and sieve typical of archaeological work to search for whatever fragments of bone are to be found. After 50 years, they are lucky to find any bone fragments at all. The specialist lays out the fragments of bone according to the part of the corpse that they have come from. The onlookers remark on how the uncle must have suffered as his bones decayed. The process of decomposition itself is taken as evidence that the uncle's ghost must surely have had good reason to feel neglected and thus return to haunt his family. After the bones have been dug up, the specialist prepares a paste of sandalwood incense dust mixed with water. He will use this paste to model a complete reconstruction of the uncle's skeleton, carefully incorporating the bone fragments that he has dug out of the grave. When he has kneaded the paste to the right consistency, the specialist begins his reconstruction of the skeleton. Begins by modeling the kneecaps. Next, the sternum. Then, the shoulder blades. bones are next in the order of reconstruction. Then all of the finger bones. While the specialist is reconstructing the bones, some of the other men prepare the charms made during the seance the night before. Using sheets of spirit money as backing, the charms are tied onto the ends of 2 bamboo poles. These poles will be erected at the head and foot of the new grave. Red string stretched between the 2 poles will mark the exact orientation of the longitudinal axis of the grave. Grave orientation is an extremely important aspect of the reburial, since it will determine if the site is in harmony with the surrounding environment, and if the ghost of the dead uncle will rest in peace. The specialist continues to work on the reconstruction of the skeleton. Fragments of bone which were dug up are incorporated into the reconstruction exactly in the positions they would occupy in a naturally articulated skeleton. All the bones and joints are dabbed with red ink. This represents the blood which gives life to the body. It is blood which connects the bones of the skeleton and makes it into a single entity. The Chinese conceive of the human body as a microcosm of the universe. If the bones which form the framework of the body are malformed or missing, this may have a bad effect on one's fate. This helps to explain the care with which the bones of the skeleton are reconstructed. The backbone is made out of a stick of charcoal. A piece is cut to size, and then each of the vertebrate joints is made by carefully sawing out a notch. The specialist is careful that just the proper number of joints is represented. Each vertebrate joint is dabbed with red ink, as is a stripe representing the spinal cord. The joints of the bones are formed with extreme care, since only if the bones articulate properly can they be oriented in such a way that they will be in harmony with the surrounding environment. The head is made last. is roughly shaped, and then the specialist inks in the nose and brow lines. Head. Touch is added when the specialist braids a queue from the cotton wool. The hairline is represented by a circle of red string. The round shape of the head, emphasized by the red string, will help to orient the bones to the directions when they are reburied in the new gray. Finally, the eyes, nose, mouth, and other features are inked in. The entire skeleton has been reconstructed. The specialist wraps all the bones in red paper. The specialist is careful to include in the same package only those bones which articulate with one another. Reconstructed parts of the skeleton are laid out by the specialist so that they will be in the correct relationship with one another. All in all, it has taken about 4 hours of work for the specialist to reconstruct. After the skeleton has been laid out in the correct order, the divining chair comes to inspect the work. The specialist recounts the exact number and position of the bones. The men move the chair back and forth in front of the bones for some time. While the chair continues to inspect the bones, the specialist readies a large ceramic jar. This jar will hold the bones when they are reburied. exact orientation of the bones is very important, so the specialist carefully marks the front and back of the jar. The specialist writes the Chinese character, which means gate, on the front of the jar, and the character meaning mountain on the back. These are the technical terms for the front and back of the grave. The leftover charcoal is used for packing material when the specialist begins to place the bones in the jar. The divining chair proceeds to the gravesite to search out the orientation of the new grave. The chair thumps the ground, and one of the bamboo marker poles made earlier is erected at the spot. After the pole is set up, the chair makes some further slight adjustments. The specialist continues with his work. He is very careful that the bones bear the proper relationship to one another as they go into the jar. The bones are arranged so that they articulate as if the skeleton were squatting in the jar with his knees drawn up to his chin. The second marker pole is erected, and the line between the two poles fixes the orientation of the grave. Now the men pull more violently on the chair. The shaman is possessed by the Emperor of the Dark Heavens while holding on to the divining chair. The shaman lurches clumsily at first, then begins to strike formal poses. His movements become exaggerated and his breathing harsh. The shaman's gloves and shirt are removed, and he is dressed in a special apron, worn only by shamans to mark their special status while possessed. He holds incense and a black tri-corner flag of command in one hand. His sword, made of a sawfish bill, is in the other. He strikes his back to draw blood. A shaman's blood is an extremely potent, powerful substance. When a shaman's blood flows from his wounds, the power of the gods is made manifest. The god announces his name and title and says that he has come at the request of the family in order to help solve the problem of their daughter-in-law's childlessness. He then orders that his steel sword be brought to him, and once more flails at his back to draw blood. After a short investigation of the lay of the land, the shaman plunges his sword into the ground, selecting the exact spot where the jar of bones will be buried. Some sticks of incense are used to mark the spot. Then a plate of rice, resting on a bundle of spirit money, is also set down there. Kneeling at the head of the gravesite, the shaman once more plunges his sword into the ground to select a critical geomantical spot. Using his sword, the shaman splits his tongue to draw blood. With this blood, he writes charms on sheets of spirit money. They will be necessary when the bones are buried in the grave. When the charms have been completed, the shaman gives detailed instructions about the future course of the reburial. Most important is the exact times when the bones are to be placed in the ground. This gravesite is somewhat vulnerable because of its location. To overcome this geometrical weakness, the shaman calls for pen and ink and writes out some more charms. These charms must be burned with fixed amounts of spirit money at the 5 cardinal directions, so that the guardians of the directions will watch over the grave. As some of the men begin to burn the offerings of spirit money, the shaman goes to inspect the jar of bones. The reconstructed skeleton has been placed in the jar. Its head is covered by a red cloth to protect it from the direct rays of the sun. After a short preliminary inspection of the bones, the shaman once more strikes himself to draw blood. He kneels down by the jar of bones and begins a lament for the ghost. It is the sad fate of a man who dies without progeny. He has no descendants to tend to his grave or to sacrifice to him in the annual rites. Most terrible of all, there is no one to burn incense for him. He is all but forgotten. The shaman speaks of the horrors of hell, the cold of the grave, and the sad fate of ghosts with no sacrifices of their own. The women of the family have heard that the Emperor of the Dark Heavens is possessing the shaman, and they come running to do homage. They bow briefly before the god's image, and then hurry to beg the god to intercede with the ghost. Both mother-in-law and daughter-in-law affirm that they are honest and sincere, and willing to do whatever the uncle's spirit wants of them. Women are told to bow down and promise that the ghost will receive an adoptive son to carry on his line. The women readily agree to do this. Then the ghost accuses them of not being sincere. He points out that the tombstone which has been made for his new grave has an inscription on it which reads like that of a man without descendants. Hurriedly agree to change the tombstone and reaffirm that they will make sure that annual sacrifices are offered to the uncle. At last the god indicates that agreement has been reached and exchanges his sword for a writing brush. Waving the women back, the shaman proceeds to fix the uncle's soul in the pot along with the bones. He writes charm characters over the front of the pot and in the air over the mouth. As he does this, he recites a formula which is meant to pacify the spirit of the dead man. Is placed on the pot, and the shaman writes a charm over it to provide an effective seal. God once more enjoins the women to be true to their word and sincerely venerate the memory of the dead uncle. The God then delivers a short speech about how sad the fate of a soul with no sacrifices from descendants. He also gives instructions setting forth the proper manner of reburial. As the seance draws to a close, a helper takes away the insignia of the god, while the shaman continues to deliver moral injunctions to the women. One of the men takes hold of the shaman from behind. The god leaves his body. The man who has been a god and the focus of veneration and authority is again a man like all the others. In 3 days' time, they will come again to bury the jar with the uncle's bones. But for this day, their work is done. Some spirit money is burned over the divining chair to purify it. The shaman's sawfish bill sword is wrapped up to take home. The shaman and the rest of the men will return to the village to be feasted by the family they have been helping. On this day, through the medium of the gods and the blood of a shaman, the bones of a hungry ghost have been rescued from extinction. Most important of all, sacrifices have been restored to his spirit and his line of descent reestablished.